Hello, everyone. Welcome to the public informational meeting on the Cascade Renewable Transmission System. I think it's okay. We're not getting too much of an echo. Bear with us for 1 second. Great. My name is Christopher Clark. I'm a senior siting analyst with the Oregon Department of Energy. I'm just going to introduce our other ODO staff members really quick so you know who to ask if you have any questions or I didn't want any additional information about this meeting. So I'm joined on stage here by Todd Cornett. He's the Assistant Director for Siting at the Oregon Department of Energy. Kate Sloan is in the audience. Kate, if you can. She's another senior siting analyst. And we have our two operations folks helping run the meeting today. We have Wally Adams and Nancy Hatch in the back, as well as Erica UNR communications person in the back corner. So feel free to ask any of us any questions at any time. If we don't know the answer, we will certainly be able to get you to somebody who does. I will have the applicant team up here in a minute and give them the opportunity to introduce themselves as well. But to get started, I'm going to give a quick introduction of the project and of the siting process itself. And then we will be going over, and then we will be going over the siting process in a little more detail. Then we will have the applicant give an overview of the proposed facility and the proposal in a little more detail. And at the end, we'll have kind of a town hall question and answer session. So please do hold your comments till the end, and there will be an opportunity. At that time, we will be asking people to queue up on this side of the stage. And then we'll also be having an opportunity for folks on the phone and online to ask questions as well. Could you change this slide? Next slide, please. All right, so the subject of this meeting is a notice of intent to file an application for site certificate for the Cascade Renewable Transmission System. That notice of intent was filed by Cascade Renewable Transmission LLC, which is a joint venture of PowerBridge LLC and Sun 2O Partners LLC. We have representatives from both of those partners here tonight. The informational meeting is intended to give members of the public an opportunity to learn about the project and to provide comments on the NOI. It's not a contested case hearing, and participation in this meeting is not required to preserve issues in standing for the contested case. That will occur later in this process. Yep, and then just again, we do have a lot to go over tonight. We have quite a few people in attendance, so thank you all for being here. And we do want to make sure everybody has the opportunity to participate. So as you're giving comments later in the process, just be mindful that there are other folks that may want to speak. Next slide, please. Okay, so the project is a proposed 300 kilovolt DC transmission line with other related and supporting facilities that spans about 100 miles between the Dalles and Portland. As you'll hear in more detail, the majority of the line will be buried in the Columbia River using a hydrojet cable burial machine or jet plow, and there'll be additional segments buried in road rights-of-way or installed using horizontal directional drilling. There's 2 converter stations proposed near both points of interconnection. There will be about 500 feet of overhead, 500 kilovolt AC line to interconnect the eastern converter station with the Big Eddy substation that's existing and operated by BPA just out of town here. And then there'll be about 3 miles of 230 kV alternate current line buried underground and installed under the Willamette River at Portland to interconnect with the Harborton substation. Finally, I think we missed one slide. You can't see this too well, but this is just a quick overview of the facility location. I just wanted to note mostly that certain portions of this line are proposed to be located in Washington State, and those will be reviewed under the jurisdiction of Washington FSEC, their Energy Facility Site Evaluation Council. That it also includes on-land segments proposed near Stevenson to avoid the Bonneville Dam. In addition, we want to point out that while a lot of the maps you will see have just a single line, that the applicant has requested some flexibility to site the line within a siting boundary that includes much of the river itself. So we will be showing a proposed alignment tonight, but just be aware that that is subject to change in the final application. Okay, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Todd to talk about the siting process.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for taking time out of your day to come here, either virtually or in person. We appreciate it. So as Chris said, we, up here right now are the Oregon Department of Energy. So the siting division is one portion of the Department of Energy, and our primary purpose is to review large-scale energy projects. So the Energy Facility Siting Program has been around since the early 70s. We do a lot of different things in terms of our review, and I'll talk about some of those later on. It's really made up of two major components. One is the Energy Facility Siting Council. So the Energy Facility Siting Council is a governor-appointed volunteer board. They're appointed by the governor, confirmed by the Senate, and they can serve up to 2 4-year terms. They're the decision makers on all of our projects. We do have one council member who's in attendance tonight, Ann Beyer. So thank you, Councilmember Beyer, for showing up. So ultimately, as you'll see in the process chart, which I have later on, everything kind of ultimately feeds to the council, and they're the decision makers. We, the Department of Energy, and particularly the Siting Division, we staff the Department of Energy, or the Energy Facility Siting Council. So we try to share information with the public. We work with the applicant. We work with the state agencies, local governments, tribal governments, who are all part of our process. But ultimately, it's the council who are the decision makers. Our process is a pretty extensive and robust technical review. So for those of you who are familiar with a sort of county's conditional use permit process, ours is much bigger than that. It's a much more significant review than that. And we do that evaluation. And like I said, we ultimately make those recommendations to the council. And one thing that I won't really speak about much here, but I wanted to kind of put on kind of the record for people is we also have a fully funded compliance program. So whether this project makes it all the way through and gets approved, we have staff who review projects once they're approved, all the way from pre-construction through construction, annually through operation, and ultimately until those facilities are removed from the landscape. So it's fully funded, and we spend a lot of time ensuring the projects that are approved are built, operated, and ultimately retired consistent with our approval process. Next slide, please. So this slide shows a list of some of the facilities that fall under the jurisdiction of the Energy Facility Siting Council. So the statutory definition, which is up on here, it's under Oregon Revised Statute 469, 300, sub 11. So if you go to that statute, that'll basically show you the definition of an energy facility. And what that functions is all of the projects that are within the jurisdiction of the Energy Facility Siting Council. The thresholds vary. Some are distance, some are megawatts, some are acreage. But what we're specifically talking about tonight is high voltage transmission lines. So the reason why this project is within the jurisdiction of the Energy Facility Siting Council is it triggers all 3 requirements. And that is it's greater than 10 miles, obviously goes from the Dalles to Portland, so greater than that. It is either 230 kilovolts or greater, which this is, and it's in more than 2 jurisdictions. So those 3 triggers are why it's within our jurisdiction. So versus a local government jurisdiction. I'm not going to get into any of the other facilities, but again, you can kind of see what falls within the jurisdiction of FSEC on the slide. Next slide, please. So I think this slide is really important, particularly at this stage. You got notices, you showed up, you've read some information. You can see on the very far left, although color is sort of odd, so hopefully you can read that correctly. We're at the very beginning stage. So we're at the notice of intent stage. We do not have an application. This is the very, very beginning stage. You can see on there that, the applicant submits their notice of intent, which effectively is a desktop level analysis. There's not any real field work that we require at this point. It's really high level. Basically, they're showing us what they want to do and where they want to do it. We provide notice. We seek public comment. We seek making sure people understand who we are at the Department of Energy and who the applicant is and how the process works. That's where we're at right now. So at the very, very beginning stage. Once we conclude the comment time frame, which is June 1st, what we do then is we create the project order, and that's the next stage that you can see to the right. And what that is effectively a laundry list. It's a laundry list of what the applicant has to submit in their application. That is, we will evaluate the notice of intent. We will come up with that. We will look at all the different locations that the project is proposed in, what are all the issues. But we also want to hear from local governments, tribal governments, state agencies, and the public to determine what those particular requirements should be. So this is why we're seeking input right now, is to help us create the project order. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. And just to make sure people understand, and the applicant will talk about their schedule, but the notice of intent is good for 2 years. So we often have projects will come in at this stage, people will get this information, and the project will go dark for a couple of years. That is not untypical. So that could happen here. I don't know that it will, but I just wanted to make sure people are aware. So we have the documentation, the handouts on the table in the back of the project page. You can sign up to receive notices, email notices. So if you want to keep track of the project, but you don't want to be looking all the time, please sign up for the email notices, because at the next stage, then we will provide notice to you if you didn't get it already through paper or by email. I'm not going to talk about all the rest of the steps, but you can see then the application comes in. We do the draft proposed order, which is really just kind of a staff report where we determine, the staff evaluates whether or not the applicant has met the burden of proof of all the standards. And then ultimately it goes all the way to the Energy Facility Siting Council at the far right for their decision. What's not on the slide is the appeal path. So unlike the local land use process, we go directly to the Oregon Supreme Court. So if a decision is made by the council, whether that's an approval or denial, the appeal path goes directly to the Oregon Supreme Court, and they have 6 months within which to make their final decision. So that is a pretty big variation in terms of how our process works versus the local process. Next slide, please. So we are a standards-based process, meaning there's a whole set of standards that the applicant has to meet, and it's their burden of proof based on information that they submit in their application to show that they meet all of these standards. It's not, for us to determine that, it's not for the council. They have to provide all of that evidence, and we evaluate that, and we ultimately make that recommendation, and the council then makes that conclusion whether or not they meet that. But we also seek your input to know whether or not there are issues or elements that we're missing, that the applicant missed in the application or that we missed in our review of the application. So again, that's why it's very important to, for those who are interested to continue to participate, continue to provide comments to us, so that we better understand the location, the issues, and how those relate to all of our standards. Applicants have to meet the same set of standards. There's 16 standards that everybody has to meet, and then there's some additional standards that are specific to some projects. So you can see on the far right, there are 2 standards, the siting standards for transmission lines. That's specific to this project, but not necessarily a wind or solar project. And the need standard, they have to prove need as well. So I won't get into those right now, but again, be thinking about, if you have issues or concerns, they really, ultimately need to relate to the standards, because that's how we can review this project. Next slide, please. So as part of their notice of intent, the applicant has to do a survey level or desktop level study of certain resources. So the top one is historic and cultural and archaeological resources, land use, you can see. So the center of the bullet or the bullseye would be the project on this diagram. And then the distance that they have to evaluate these different resources, you can see the distances that they go out. So this is what they've already had to do in their notice of intent. When they submit their application, these may expand or these may contract. That's what we established in the project order. So again, that prior slide where I said the next step is the project order, we want to hear from people to say, are these the right distances? Is, half a mile for land use, wildfire and fish and wildlife, right? Or should it be less? Or should it be more? If you know of issues that are, 0.6 miles versus 0.5 miles, please provide comments on that. That helps us to evaluate whether we should keep these study areas the same for the application or if they need to go further. Next slide, please. Land use is an interesting part. So it's one of our standards, one of the 14 or 16 rather council standards. The applicant has a choice. They can either go what's called Path A, where they seek local land use approval. They would go to the city or county with, whose jurisdiction within which the project is located and seek the land use approval from that city or county. Or they can request the Energy Facility Siting Council have that authority to review. Currently, the applicant has requested that the Energy Facility Siting Council do the entire land use review for the entire length of the line. So that's what we're going with right now. They ultimately have to make that choice prior to submitting the application. But right now, they are seeking to consolidate that. And that is my last slide. So I just wanted to reiterate what Chris said is, once we're done with this, we'll have a Q&A. Once we're done with the Q&A, if anybody wants to stick around and have specific questions to either, myself, Chris, any other member of our team or the applicant team, we'll be here as long as you're interested in asking those questions. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Todd. And if you could go to the next slide, please. Okay, so one of the unique features of a transmission line siting project is that the applicant is required to provide a corridor selection assessment along with their application. That assessment must both justify and explain why they selected the proposed routes that they included in the application. And one thing I wanted to point out is that in the NOI, there are multiple corridors proposed near the western interconnection, and I'll show those on a map in a second. But as I said before, the proposed corridors are subject to change in the final application. That's a valid thing to do. The applicant may propose adjustments in the application, or they may propose them at one of these meetings. And I also wanted to point out that the applicant must consider public comments in their final corridor selection. So please keep that in mind when you're asking questions tonight or when you're preparing your written comments. If you could go to the next slide. This shows the western end near Portland. And I just want to point out that the primary proposed route continues in the river till about the midpoint of Hayden Island, and then crosses the island and goes under the North Portland Harbor and comes on land and then travels on Marine Drive to the converter station site. The alternate that has been proposed would come on land at Broughton Beach and then follow Marine Drive. Both of those proposed routes are currently under consideration. If they are included in the application, we would review both of them. And the applicant would be authorized to construct one of the two, not both. If you could go, and then there is a second small option just to connect the converter station to North Lombard Street, shown there in option 3. These are all shown, I think, in the NOI. If you want to see a more detailed map, and the applicant will also be explaining the proposed route in more detail during their presentation. You could go to the next slide, please. Okay, and there is only one corridor proposed on the eastern end of the proposed line, but I did want to show it since we are here in the Dallas tonight. So I will again let the applicant describe this, but I did want to just point out that there is an on-land segment that will be connecting to the Big Eddy substation. Next slide, please. Okay, and then finally, before I turn it over to the applicant, I just wanted to point out that there is an opportunity for the public to provide written comments. All written comments should be submitted to Odo by June 1st, so we can consider them and include them when we prepare our project order. You can also provide comments during the Q&A session during this meeting. And again, I just want to point out that this meeting is not a public hearing or a contested case hearing, and participation isn't required now or in writing to preserve standing for the contested case later in the review. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the applicant team.
Thank you. I want to thank you for being here. And I'm Chris Hocker with Cascade Renewable Transmission, the applicant. Again, I want to thank the FSEC staff for holding this meeting and for those of you who took the time to come out and learn more about the project, proposed project. And before I start, I just want to acknowledge that we are well aware that this whole area, the Columbia Gorge area and well beyond, is part of the ancestral homeland of tribal nations. And we intend to conduct the development of this project with that very much in mind, and we realize this is just the first step in hopefully building a authentic relationship. With that, next slide, please. FSEC, I think, wants us to focus primarily on the where and the what of this project, but we're also going to go through some of the aspects of the why of this project. We're trying not to belabor that, but I think it's important to understand the context. Next, please. Basically, the whole rationale for this project is started with the passage in both Oregon and Washington of legislation that mandates the transformation of energy to a decarbonized economy. And the two states' mandates are slightly different, but basically the deadline for achieving 80% of the goals is the year 2030, which may sound like a long time away, but projects of this type take a long time to develop, to permit, and to build. So we feel that we're starting at the right time, and we've actually been examining and studying this project for 2 or 3 years at this point in order to meet that goal of 2030, which we'll talk about a little later with the schedule. What's needed, the situation is that renewable energy is primarily best sited east of the Cascades. The resources are better. There's availability for efficient solar and wind projects. The people who use and will be basically required to use the renewable energy, the clean energy, are primarily located in the West, of course. So crossing the Cascade and getting the renewable energy from east to west is the key challenge here. I think it's been increasingly acknowledged that new transmission of one kind or another from east to west is seriously needed, and particularly needed if you're going to reach the goal of 2030. Next slide. Yeah, next slide, please. There we go. Again, this just reinforces my point that according to Portland General, it'll be impossible to meet the 2030 goal without new transmission. And I think that's pretty generally acknowledged. Next slide, please. So try to sum it up. There's no available or very little available transmission right now that hasn't already been kind of spoken for, accounted for in the existing system. There are stranded renewables east of the Cascades, either built or not quite built yet, but hope to be built. There's an increasing energy demand because of the drive toward electrification of cars, of trucks, of buildings. And I think it's fair to say that everyone would acknowledge that building overhead transmission has its own set of challenges. So that's basically kind of the setting. There we go. As you can see from the left-hand photo, what we're proposing is a bundled transmission cable, primarily in the river. Of the 100-mile route, about 83 miles is in the river, about 17 total in 3 segments is buried underground. So you know that is not a photoshopped photo. This is the cable. And it's about 6 inches in diameter, a 2-cable bundle, along with a fiber optic cable, as you can see on the right-hand photo, is fed out into the river from a barge or a ship and installed 10 to 15 feet below the existing sediment of the river. This is a proven way to serve a lot of energy needs, and 1,100 megawatts, which is what the proposed capacity of this line is, will serve around 800,000 homes. Next, please. So this is a very high-level view of the route, and I think FSEC already showed this, but it starts in the Dalles, continues in the river to the Bonneville Dam area, bypasses the Bonneville Dam, again, totally underground, re-enters the river, and heads over toward Portland, where it comes ashore again about the midpoint of Hayden Island, and finally connects to a converter station, and we'll talk about converter stations in a second, in the Portland Rivergate industrial area, and then over to PGE's Harborton substation. To go to the next slide to give, and I guess you've seen the route and the Dalles. So as was stated, the intention is to build a converter station just adjacent to the existing Big Eddy, BPA's Big Eddy substation, to convert the AC power that is coming into Big Eddy to direct current or DC power. Why do that? Plenty of reasons, and if people want to explore that, we have people here who can explain that a lot better than I can. But essentially, DC is a very efficient way to transmit energy long distances, and particularly underwater. There are other advantages to DC that I don't need to go into here, but it helps stabilize the grid. A number of positives about DC. When it reaches the Western converter station site, which is the right-hand slide, there's another converter station where the power will be converted from DC back to AC, and then at Harborton, it can be distributed further into the grid as AC power. Next slide. This is the route, proposed route of the Bonneville Dam bypass. I realize it's not in Oregon, but I think it's important for people on both sides of the river to understand the project as a whole, because it will involve and it will benefit both states. So the idea is to come out of the water east of the Bonneville Dam, travel primarily on State Route 14, bypass the dam, and then re-enter the river south of the dam. Next slide. So we talked about, there we go. Whoop. If you could go back, there we go. We talked about a converter station. What is a converter station? Again, the purpose of a converter station is to have equipment and technology that will convert DC to AC or AC to DC. So there will be two of these. This particular photo is of a converter station that was built about 12 years ago in San Francisco. There's a project very similar conceptually to this one using DC high voltage submarine technology that goes underneath the San Francisco Bay. And so this converter station is right in essentially downtown, not exact downtown, but it's in the city of San Francisco. The sites are about 5 acres. They look very much like a traditional substation. The large building is a control building where the conversion takes place. Next slide. There we go. The construction methodology, first of all, has been done many places around the world. Most recently, the San Francisco project, and then there are 2 submarine cable projects that our company was responsible for permitting, for developing, for constructing, and we continue to operate those projects. Those both go between New Jersey and different parts of New York. One goes into Manhattan and the other goes on to Long Island. The graphic on the left sort of indicates how this is done. There's a machine called a jet plow. There is if you see the sort of plow blade that extends below it, it cuts a trench with water jets. The trench is maybe 18 inches wide. The cable is fed from the ship or barge into the hydroplow, the jet plow. And as the machine cuts the trench by fluidizing the sediment, the cable then lays down right into it as a simultaneous operation. The fluidized sediment, about 3/4 of it, will settle back down into the trench. So this is a surprisingly low impact method of installing major infrastructure, particularly with the infrastructure being 12 inches or 14 inches in diameter, if you count, 2 of these bundled together. What you would see from the river is basically similar to what you see on the right-hand photo. It's a barge. In this case, this is from our Neptune project in New Jersey on the Raritan River. So you would see a barge and a workboat, and that's what you would see. And the installation is very slow. It probably covers about 1.5 miles on average per day. And a lot of the reason for that is to minimize the disruption of the sediment. We expect that the installation of 100 miles could take a total of maybe 4 to 6 months. The entire project, because much of the construction is in the converter stations, would take around 3 years. Next. This is our proposed schedule. And we want to acknowledge that just because we put up a schedule doesn't mean that that's a schedule. We understand that. And we're at the very beginning, as Todd and Chris said, of our permitting process. But the schedule has been formulated based on our own experience in building and permitting similar projects. So on that basis, we could see completing this project by the end of 2028 or perhaps the very beginning of 2029. The key point about that is that it means it's within the 2030 deadline for meeting the clean energy mandates that have already been passed by Washington and Oregon. Next slide. So, kind of summarizing the key features. First of all, as I said before, the purpose of the project is to help the states meet their already existing clean energy goals and do it in a substantial way. 1,100 megawatts meets a lot of need. The process of installing the cable is low impact. And again, based on our experience, we know that. We will be taking care, and this goes to something that FSEC has already stated, is that we can show a route on a map and believe that it's constructible, but it only begins, it's based on our limited understanding at the desktop level at this point. So we would expect, and we're already starting the process of detailed on-the-ground studies to determine what the impacts might be, what the areas might be that need to be avoided if we can. And so when we say it's designed, we're not anywhere near final design. We still need to take all that input and feedback and understand if there are areas that, you know, would require a change in route in order to avoid that kind of impact. We do, of course, believe that there's an advantage to this in that it has no visual impact and it takes away the kinds of risks that are often associated with transmission, like wildfire risk, severe climate, that kind of thing. So it supports resiliency of the system. In terms of potential benefits, this is a major construction project. We think that there's 300 to 400 jobs all told at peak during the construction process. The estimated cost at this point is about 1.5 billion. That'd be in today's dollars. And we are pursuing a federal Department of Energy grant that would help alleviate that cost. But we are not asking for any state grant, state money, state subsidy. And in fact, we think that the facilities could be a major contributor to the local tax bases. Next. I want to emphasize that we're well aware of the extent of the scrutiny and the environmental reviews that are going to take place at the state and the federal level. We also, as I said before, want to be respectful and responsive to concerns of the tribal nations. We do believe and are convinced that this can be done in a low impact way, both during construction and during operation. And this is based on any of a number of these types of facilities that have been installed around the world, including our own, where we have not had experience any sort of adverse experience in terms of environmental impact. I should mention that because this question often comes up, is there an electromagnetic field impact? We can point you and we would encourage you to read a number of studies that have been done on this issue, specifically as it relates to marine life. So, we want to be clear about wanting to help you, the public, understand this project and address the concerns in those ways. A point about the river installation, the agencies, one way to help protect marine life is to impose what's called work windows so that you can only install the cable during particular times of the year, away from migration, away from spawning season, and away from when most of the recreational use of the river takes place. And we fully expect and have experienced in our own way work windows and can comply with those. Next, please. We're, as I said, expecting a lot of attention and agency review and public review of this project. We will be working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, both from an environmental perspective and a navigational perspective. This project will be fully reviewed under NEPA. There will be, as part of that process, Section 106 consultation with the tribal nations, government to government. We will be working with the Washington FSEC, it's a slightly different acronym, as well as the Oregon FSEC, as well as approvals that might be required from the municipalities and the counties. We also need interconnection agreements with both the Bonneville Power Administration and Portland General Electric. And this event tonight really is the kickoff of our permitting process. Actually, it started with the submission of the notice of intent and now the public meetings. Just go quickly to the next slide. There we go. This is just a listing of similar marine transmission lines that have been built in various places. As you can see, a few of them have been done in the U.S. Of the 4 that exist in the U.S., our company has been responsible for 2 of them. They range, as you can see, in terms of length, between 453 miles and 7 miles. So the technology works regardless of the length of the line. Next. Thanks. And just to talk briefly about our own experience, we have 2. The Neptune project runs from New Jersey to Long Island. It now supplies about 25% of all the electric energy used on Long Island and has for 16 years. We're coming up to 16 years. The Hudson project, similarly, in this case, it runs down the Hudson River and interconnects to a major substation right in downtown Manhattan. Again, it's been, they've both been running well with no environmental issues. Next. You've probably met some of these people. A lot of them are here tonight, but we are supported by a team of experienced people that hopefully can answer questions probably better than I can if you have any. And finally, next. We've been doing this kind of project for a while, and we know that the only way that they get built and built successfully is to engage openly and respectfully and to meet all permitting and regulatory requirements, to not cut corners, to try to be responsive to questions and inquiries, even if they're difficult, and to try to partner with residents and communities, not only to address their concerns, but also to help advance compatible interests of the environment, social, economic, and we intend to do that. So with that, that concludes the presentation. Thank you.
Right. We're gonna start the question and answer section in just a second, but Nancy, could you put my slideshow back up for 1 second? Great. I guess while we're waiting, can I get a quick show of hands of how many people are interested in asking a question or providing comment? Great. Okay. Okay, great. Yeah, so if you, those of you that do want to provide comment can make your way down to the microphone at the front here. I just wanted to share that the department does have a number of helpful resources on our website, and the link is provided at the bottom there. For those of you in the room, we also have some handouts that have all the different helpful links on them, so you can go ahead and grab one of those and take it home, and hopefully at least find the project page and the FSEC page, which can take you to many of these resources. Also from this page, you can reach our new citing comment portal, which will allow you to post a comment and have that posted directly to our website. We also have our public guided citing, which there is a copy on the table up front, and numbers of handouts about the citing standards themselves. In addition to this, if you want to sign up to get email notices about this project, you can find a link from that page as well, or you can speak to one of us at this meeting and we can help you get signed up on our display out front. Okay, and then if you could advance to the next slide. Great. Great. Thank you. And actually just go ahead one more. Okay. So like I said, we'll have people in the room that want to provide a comment, just come down to the microphone here at the front now, and then we can take comments from folks online. If you are on the webinar and you want to provide a comment, please press the hand icon on the lower right hand side of your window. You may have to click the button that says participants first, and then that little hand icon will pop up. If you're on the phone, you can press *3, and that will raise your hand. And then once you're done providing your comment, please just press *3 again. Okay, and then yeah, I guess we can go comments here. Yep, please go ahead, and if you don't mind stating your name for the record.
Oh, sure. Okay. My name is Greg Parson. I live right here in the Dalles, and I'm a retired IBW 48 member electrician and retired from Bonneville Power Administration. So this was kind of my jurisdiction here, Big Eddy Substation, Celilo Converter Station, and numerous substations around here. But my question is mainly, right now I'm advocating with Columbia Gorge Community College and with the youth, seniors mainly right now, talking about apprenticeship and training. So along that line, consideration would be for apprentices and local area potential jobs for young people, you know, within our jurisdiction here. So that's my train of thought there.
Respond very briefly. Yes, we're intending absolutely and specifically to work with, for instance, the community college here and others to encourage that kind of thing, apprenticeships and training. And it's not just for us, but for the future, because having that technological ability is going to translate to the renewable energy that's going to be built east of here. And when I talk about east of here, it's not just Oregon and Washington. There's a lot of solar and wind that is being built in further eastern states, Wyoming, Nevada, that can be, as I'm sure you know, transmitted to the Big Eddy connection point. So what we're proposing is basically a last mile solution to get over the Cascades and into the load centers on the west. And I should mention here too that the benefit of the project is going to go beyond just Oregon, because the western location gets us to the I-5 corridor. And so it will help the power flow, not just east-west, but also to some extent north-south. So that's another reason why it's kind of a bi-state project, not just physically, but in terms of the potential benefit of meeting both states' renewable mandates.
Thank you. And just one more, maybe a comment, not so much a question, but I see this as a good opening where tying the grids across the United States, DC would be an advocate for everybody to kind of share and balance that power load based on demand. And hey, if there happens to be storms in certain areas and part of the grid goes down or generation, that, you know, this gives us another avenue. It's just kind of like our interstate system or our rail systems, you know, it's about the most efficient way to go is DC over any amount of distance. I know that from working it. So thank you.
Thanks so much for your comment. Is there anyone else in the room that has a question or would like to provide a comment? Thanks so much.
Thank you. I'm Whit Anderson. I represent the city of Mosier. I got lots of questions, but maybe a couple. Chris, Cascade Chris, I forget your last name. You mentioned, your slide said the Dalles, Stevenson, and Portland, I think, are the municipalities affected. We got the notice here in Mosier, as Mosier has a bunch of water that, or land that's under the Bonneville Pool. So do you, I guess my question goes to your desktop studies to date don't have the alignment actually known yet? I mean, is Mosier not in your corridor, or is that why Mosier didn't show up on that slide? Or
Not necessarily, no. I mean, I think, as I think Todd pointed out, that jurisdictionally, you know, we're expecting that FSEC will do the coordination with the municipalities to talk about the route and where it might go. The route, again, is subject to adjustment based on what is found in the in-depth studies. So it was certainly not our intent to kind of ignore Mosier.
yeah,
In terms of an impact to Mosier, we would expect very little or none. I think we showed kind of the visual impact of watching a cable laying barge go down the river very slowly. That's about the impact.
so again, you don't have the exact alignment determined yet. I mean, you haven't gone out and done the surveys in the river.
We have done some surveys in the river. We have modeled, to the extent it's possible on available data, the sort of topography of the river bottom. And so from an installation and a constructability point of view, that's basically what our preliminary alignment is based on. What we need to complete the picture are the environmental studies and how that route might change based on what we know of in the river, as well as the geology. And there will be quite an extensive geological program to know what kinds of sediments we're dealing with. And we know that the sediment varies depending on where you are.
Yeah, that was kind of my follow-up because I know a little bit about the river. I'm retired, 35 years Corps of Engineers, and my last job, all these dams operation came under my team, and there's a lot of rock out there too. It's
Yeah.
not 15 feet of sediment in many areas.
No,
So you're not going to drill rock. You're going to put concrete cover, I guess, where you.
if I'm going to turn this over, I'd like to introduce Ernie Griggs here, just because on issues like this, he's certainly better than I am. Ernie has been about 40 years in the HVDC business. He's been our project manager for both the Neptune and the Hudson projects. And he does know more than I do.
Well, that's debatable, but I'll take the compliment anyway. Your question is pertinent. The riverbed is not just simply silty sediment the whole way, and we know that. In fact, that's actually a couple of the surveys that we did was to try to better understand a couple of tricky areas. One of which we chose to actually move the location of the cable. That's one of the reasons why you now see a somewhat prolonged way around Bonneville Dam, was because east of the dam, it is really rocky, not a little rocky, it's a lot rocky. And so we've stayed away from that. What we will be doing is, once we understand where we think we should put the cable with regards to our environmental studies, we will then do our detailed survey and we will start to locate it within the riverbed. It's going to take some time. It's not going to happen in the next 6 months, but over the next couple of years, we'll understand where it will be, and we'll be able to sit down with everybody and say, okay, this is where the cable's going, and this is how it works, and this is how we're going to be able to bury it. You mentioned concrete mats. That's an application that could be applied. Also, rock burial could be applied in certain circumstances too.
Okay.
So there's technologies out there that have been used. We will look to our OEM, our cable manufacturer, to help us understand what the different applications are used around the world for the purpose to be able to understand what the right solutions are here.
Yeah. So I guess I take away the logical conclusion is once you know the actual alignment in the siting council's process, there'll be an ability to engage like our community with our comprehensive plan or whatever. Once we know, yeah, it's actually in Mosier's jurisdiction.
So does that sound right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. One more question, and I'll yield my time because I don't want to dominate. You mentioned 1,100 megawatts towards the 2030 objectives. I think in both states was 80% carbon free. What's the context for that? What in 2030 the West Side load is going to be? What?
Yeah.
20 million. Well, it's probably not that much. How much does this project contribute to that goal?
The numbers keep going up. If you take the most recent numbers from PGE and the utility Puget Sound, the number that they are offering as potential additional need is north of 5,000 megawatts. So does our 1,100 megawatts add up to 5,000? No, it doesn't. We see ourselves as part of the solution, not the solution. That said, as I mentioned at the beginning, we started our development kind of journey a couple of years ago because we know how long these things take. And so our goal is to try to get this done by 2030 to at least be a big help in reaching at least a big part of that goal.
One more. So will this transmission capacity just be exclusive renewables, or given it's the grid, electrons coming from, coal fired in Montana maybe that's a silly question, but
No, it's a very pertinent question. And what we're proposing is essentially a piece of major infrastructure. So our line is not tied into a particular generating plant of whatever kind. It's a system that links the east with the west. That said, the laws that were passed in Washington and Oregon publicly with a lot of public input and a lot of public demand, we find it highly unlikely that those are going to change and see a reversal other than for renewable energy. So that's, and I can't guarantee beyond that. You're quite right about the electrons. But I think public policy has already stepped in and answered that question.
Okay, thank you for your comment. And just one last check, is there anybody else in the room who has a question or would like to provide a comment? And if not, Nancy, could you let me know if there's, oh, do we have one more? Excellent.
Make one quick comment, if I may.
My name's Rich McCauley. I live over in Clickitat County. I'm also a member of IBEW Local 48. So this interests me because I'm in the electrical field. I'm well aware that our infrastructure in the United States is not up to par. We need some help or transmission. I'm surrounded out on the other side of Goldendale by solar panels and wind turbines everywhere, right? So I know they're producing clean, green energy. But I also see them getting shut down periodically, these turbines, wind turbines. And so I've always wondered why that is. And I'm wondering if that's because of transmission. Do we not have the capacity to transmit? And will that help to use that power? I apologize, I've got a pump going off here. Will this new transmission line that you're proposing, will that help get more of the energy that's produced actually used? Is that a fair question?
It is a fair question. One of the challenges of renewable energy is its variability, whether it's solar or wind. And what transmission like this does is it gets you broader access to more resources because they don't all shut down at the same time. And so basically what this tries to accomplish is take the existing transmission network and like Chris said, this isn't the only solution, but this partial solution helps to get us out beyond our normal supply lines and be able to allow us to get into Wyoming wind and some of the other areas that are going to be able to supply additional renewable energy. And that's how it's going to come about. But it's going to take public policy combined with the existing utilities, combined with folks like us putting in new technology to sort of come together and start to make this thing all work. Because right now what you're seeing is the infancy where they're trying to learn how to walk and they're not there yet. So I hope that helps to answer your question, but it
does. One more quick comment. I'm obviously also, I think the local community, it's a little selfish on my part because there's going to be a lot of electricians that are going to be building these converter stations. So for us, that's a great thing. We got a lot of local electricians that'll benefit from having a job here. It looked 2 to 3 years for completion of the project. I don't know if these converter stations will take that long to build, but it'll be good for the local families.
Absolutely.
To have a local job, not have to travel down the interstate to work.
I first started working on HVDC interconnectors back in 1985. And a mentor of mine said, if you figure this out and how it works, you'll be able to work at this forever. And it looks like it's even more so that way today.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how this goes and it'll cause me to dig in a little deeper. Because I'm sure you're well aware, there's going to be a lot of interest. I had comments talking about impact to fish, a lot of friends that fish. What's the impact? You know, the EMF and how's this going to affect my future out there on the weekends?
All important questions that
Yeah.
we're gonna address.
Good. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to it.
Okey doke.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the comment. Nancy, is there anyone on the phone or webinar that has a hand up? Okay. Well, just as a reminder, if you would like to give a comment online, please go ahead and press that little hand button. Or if you're on the phone, and I can't see if we have any phone callers, please press *3. And if there's none, we can go ahead and wrap up. Although I will just comment that those of us from the department will be around for a little bit for anybody that wants to discuss one-on-one or ask us any questions. I'm not sure how much longer you all are going to be here, but I'm sure you're available for. Excellent. So thank you all again for coming. Again, if you have any questions at all, please do let us know. Nancy, if you could go to the next slide, the last slide. Great. Yeah, so my contact information is on the screen. You can both send me any questions you have, but also if you wish to submit written comments about the NOI, please send them to the email address on the screen anytime before June 1st. And with that, thank you everybody for coming, and we look forward to hearing from you. Oh. Well, excellent. If you are online and you wanted to provide a comment, I believe you should be unmuted now. Please go ahead.
Morgan Steele with the City of Portland, Senior Environmental Planner with the Bureau of Development Services. I was just curious if we'd be able to access this presentation somewhere after tonight.
Hi, Morgan. Thank you for your comment. Yes, this webinar was recorded, and we will be posting it to our website by Friday.
Thank you.
Excellent. Oh, this and tomorrow night's meeting in Portland as well.
Okay.
Okay. Well, seeing no other. One more. Okay. Oh, I can't see you. Annika Roberts, you should be unmuted if you want to provide a comment. Hi, Annika, we cannot hear you in the room. If you have a mute on your end, please do turn it off, and you're welcome to provide your comment. Okay. All right. Well, excellent. Well, thank you all again for attending, and we look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.